Ambassador Gina Park walked slowly through the massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber. Her heart was beating fast, but she tried to keep her face calm. This was the most important day in human history. Today, humanity would ask to join. The Galactic Confederation, the group of alien species that ruled most of the galaxy. The chamber was huge, bigger than any building on Earth. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft blue light. Hundreds of alien beings sat in curved rows, looking down at the small platform where Gina stood. She had never felt so small in her life. Dr. Hyun Kim, her advisor, stood quietly behind her. He was a smart man who studied alien languages and cultures. Next to him was Colonel Minho Choi, who knew everything about Earth's military history. They were the best team Earth could send, but looking at all these powerful aliens, Gina wondered if it would be enough. The aliens were unlike anything most humans had ever seen. The Valorians looked like giant lizards with thick scales and sharp teeth. Their leader, War Commander Thex, was 7 feet tall and covered in scars from old battles. He stared at Gina with yellow eyes that seemed to see right through her. The Zephyrites were completely different. They looked like they were made of glass or water, their bodies see-through and always changing shape. Scholar Vale, their speaker, floated above her seat without touching it. Her voice sounded like wind chimes when she talked, but the strangest were the ethereals. They didn't have bodies like humans understood them. Elder Corvex looked like a ball of bright energy that hurt to look at directly. When he spoke, his words seemed to come from everywhere at once, making the air itself vibrate. There were dozens, of other species too. Some looked like giant insects, others like living rocks, and some like machines that had learned to think. All of them were staring at Gina, waiting to hear what this young human had to say. Gina took a deep breath and began to speak. Honored members of the Galactic Confederation, I am Ambassador Gina Park, speaking for all of humanity. We come before you today not as beggars, but as partners. We want to join your great alliance and help make the galaxy a better place. She talked about human achievements, how they had learned to travel between stars, how they had cured diseases, how they had built cities that reached into the clouds. She spoke about human art, music, and literature. She tried to show that humans were ready to take their place among the stars. But as she talked, she could see that the aliens were not impressed. Some were making soft sounds that might have been laughter. Others whispered to each other in languages that sounded like static or the buzzing of insects. When Gina finished speaking, War Commander Thex stood up. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. Humans want to join us? Your species still fights wars with metal bullets and chemical explosives. We watched your last great war end only decades ago. You are babies playing with dangerous toys. Scholar Vale's glassy form shimmered as she spoke. Your culture is equally primitive. You call noise music and random emotions art. There is no depth, no real meaning to anything you create. You are not ready for civilized society. But the worst words came from Elder Corvex. The ancient being's energy form pulsed brighter as he spoke, and his words seemed to shake the very walls of the chamber. Humanity lacks the spiritual growth needed for galactic citizenship. You know nothing of the sacred bonds that connect. True warrior peoples across the stars. You are incomplete beings, forever stuck in childhood. One by one, other alien leaders stood to speak against humanity. The insect-like hive speakers buzzed about human disorder. The rock-like resonance rang with sounds of disapproval. Even the machine constructs calculated that humans were inefficient and unpredictable. Each word was like a knife in Gina's heart. She had prepared for questions, even for some rejection, but not for this level of contempt. These aliens didn't just think humans weren't ready to join them. They thought humans were barely worth considering at all. The vote came quickly. Species after species voted no. Some didn't even bother to explain why. They just made dismissive gestures with claws, tentacles, or energy fields, and turned away as the rejection became clear. Gina felt tears starting to form in her eyes. Behind her, she could hear Dr. Kim and Colonel Choi breathing heavily, trying to control their own emotions. All of Earth's hopes, all of humanity's dreams of joining the galactic community, were crashing down around them. But as they prepared to leave in defeat, Something caught Gina's eye. The crystal walls of the chamber were covered in ancient carvings, symbols that spiraled and curved in patterns that seemed almost familiar. She had seen something like this before, but couldn't remember where. Dr. Kim noticed her staring and moved closer. "Ambassador," he whispered. "Those symbols, they remind me of something from Earth's old military museums. The patterns look like musical notation, but very old." Gina nodded slowly, a small spark of hope beginning to grow in her chest. Maybe this humiliating rejection wasn't the end of the story. Maybe it was just the beginning of a much bigger discovery. As they walked out of the chamber, heads held high despite their defeat, none of them knew that they had just stumbled upon the key that would change everything between humans and aliens forever. Dr. Hyun Kim could not sleep. It had been 3 days since they returned to Earth from the humiliating rejection at the Galactic Council, but his mind kept going back to those strange symbols on the chamber walls. He sat in his small office in Seoul, surrounded by books about alien languages and human history, trying to make sense of what he had seen. The symbols were carved deep into the crystal walls, obviously very old. They had spiraling patterns that reminded him of something, but he could not put his finger on what it was. He had drawn them from memory as best he could, and now the papers covered his desk like pieces of a puzzle he could not solve. At 3 in the morning, Hyun finally gave up trying to sleep and went to his computer. He started looking through databases of human military history, searching for anything that might match the alien symbols. Hours passed as he scrolled through images of ancient weapons, battle flags, and ceremonial objects from every culture on Earth. Then he found it. In a collection of Korean military artifacts from over 1,000 years ago, there was a photo of an old war drum. Carved into the wooden surface were patterns that made Hyun's heart stop. They were not exactly the same as the alien symbols, but they were close. Very close. With shaking hands, Hyun began searching for more examples. He found similar patterns on Celtic battle horns from Scotland. Ancient Maori war clubs from New Zealand had carvings that matched parts of the alien symbols. Native American war shields showed designs that could have been drawn by the same hand that carved the council chamber walls. But it was not just the visual patterns that matched. Hyun was also an expert in music and sound. He began to analyze the mathematical relationships in both the human artifacts and his drawings of the alien symbols. What he found made him forget about sleep entirely. The symbols were not just pictures. They were mathematical representations of sound, rhythm, and melody. The spirals showed how voices should rise and fall. The intersecting lines indicated when different singers should join in. The whole thing was like sheet music, but far more complex than anything humans had ever created, and the human military traditions matched it perfectly. Hyun spent the next week diving deeper into his research. He contacted museums around the world, asking for detailed photos of ancient military artifacts. He spoke with experts on traditional war songs from every continent. What he discovered was amazing and frightening at the same time. Every human culture that had ever existed had some form of military music. War drums, battle chants, victory songs, funeral hymns for fallen warriors. They all shared certain mathematical patterns, certain ways of building harmony and rhythm that seemed to follow universal rules. But more importantly, these same patterns appeared in archaeological sites from alien worlds. Hyun found research papers about Valorian ruins that mentioned strange circular objects archaeologists had assumed were cooking pots. But when Hyun looked at the photos, he could see they were drums. The acoustic properties were all wrong for cooking, but perfect for creating the deep, resonant sounds that would carry across a battlefield. Zephyrite dig sites had yielded crystalline objects that scientists thought were scientific instruments, but Hyun could see that their shape and internal structure would create specific harmonic frequencies when air passed through them. They were not tools for measuring. They were instruments for making music. Even the ancient ethereal sites contained evidence. Energy patterns frozen in special crystals showed waveforms that matched exactly with the mathematical structures Hyun had found in human war songs. The conclusion was impossible to ignore. Every major species in the Galactic Confederation had once had the same military musical traditions as humans, but somewhere in their long history, they had abandoned these practices. They had decided that war songs and battle chants were primitive, uncivilized beneath them. Only humanity, young and isolated on their small planet, had kept the traditions alive. Hyun called Ambassador Park immediately. "You need to come to my office right now," he said, his voice shaking with excitement. An hour later, Gina Park stood in Hyun's cluttered office, staring at the evidence spread across every surface. Photos of ancient alien artifacts, mathematical charts showing harmonic relationships, and recordings of human war songs from dozens of cultures. "What are you telling me?" she asked quietly. "I am telling you that what we call war songs and battle chants are not just human inventions," Hyun said. "They are part of a universal warrior culture that once existed across the entire galaxy. Every species had them. The Valorians, the Zephyrhites, the Ethereals, all of them. But they forgot. They threw away something precious because they thought it made them look primitive." Gina sat down heavily in a chair, trying to process what she was hearing. "And we kept it alive." "Exactly. While they were becoming civilized and advanced, we preserved something they lost. Something that connected all warrior peoples across the stars." Hyun's eyes were bright with discovery. "They called us incomplete, but we are the only ones who are still whole." Gina looked at the evidence again, seeing it with new eyes. The rejection at the Galactic Council suddenly made sense in a completely different way. The aliens had not dismissed humanity because they were superior. They had dismissed humanity because seeing human traditions reminded them of what they had given up. "We need to go back," she said quietly. "Yes," Hyun agreed, "but this time we are not going as supplicants begging for acceptance. We are going as teachers, ready to show them what they have forgotten." 3 months later, Ambassador Gina Park stood once again before the massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber. But this time she was not nervous. This time she knew something the aliens did not know about themselves. Behind her walked Dr. Hyun Kim, carrying a small bag of instruments and recording devices. Next to him was Dr. Sora Lee, a woman who had spent her life studying how different cultures express themselves through music. Colonel Minho Choi walked beside them, his uniform decorated with medals from Earth's military academies. The aliens in the chamber looked surprised to see the humans return. Many of them made sounds that might have been laughter or annoyance. War Commander Thex leaned forward in his seat, his yellow eyes gleaming with what looked like amusement. "The rejected species returns," he said, his voice echoing through the crystal chamber. "Have you come back for more humiliation, humans?" "Elder," Korvex's energy form pulsed brighter. "We made our decision clear 3 months ago. Humanity is not ready for membership in the Confederation. What could possibly have changed?" Gina stepped forward, her voice calm and confident. "Honored delegates, we have made a discovery that we believe will interest you greatly. We request permission to demonstrate something that may change how you view not just humanity, but yourselves as well." Scholar Vale's transparent form shimmered. "What kind of demonstration could possibly be relevant to this council?" "We propose a simple test," Gina said. "We ask each species represented here to share their oldest military traditions. Your ancient battle songs, your war chants, your ceremonial music from the time before you joined the Confederation. Then we will share ours." The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then War Commander Thex began to laugh, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Battle songs? Military music? What are you talking about, human? Your species must have had songs for warriors, music for battles, chants for victory celebrations," Dr. Hyun Kim said, stepping forward. "All intelligent species develop such traditions." "We have evolved far beyond such primitive practices," Scholar Vale said, her voice ringing like crystal bells. "Our military operations are governed by pure logic and mathematical precision. We have no need for emotional displays." One by one, the other alien delegates confirmed what Hyun had discovered. In his research, the Valorians had grown past barbaric war cries thousands of years ago. The Zephyrhites had replaced any martial music with tactical algorithms. The insect-like Hive speakers buzzed that they had optimized beyond individual expression long before they developed space travel. Elder Korvex spoke for the ancient ethereals. No civilized species in this chamber has engaged in such primitive behavior for millennia. The fact that you even ask such questions proves how far behind you are in your development." Gina smiled, and her smile made several aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Then perhaps we can show you what you have lost," she nodded to her team. Dr. Hyun Kim opened his bag and pulled out what looked like a simple wooden flute. But when he began to play, the sound that emerged was unlike anything the aliens had ever heard. The melody started low and quiet, like a single voice calling across a vast battlefield. It was haunting and beautiful, but also strong and proud. Dr. Sora Lee joined in, her voice weaving around the flute's melody with words in an ancient Korean dialect that spoke of warriors preparing for battle. But as they continued, something strange began to happen. The mathematical patterns in their music, the harmonic structures, the rhythmic foundations, all began to match the ancient symbols carved into the chamber walls. Hyun had studied those symbols for months, and now he was bringing them back to life. Colonel Choi added his voice, chanting in a deep bass that spoke of soldiers marching together, of brothers in arms facing impossible odds. The three human voices began to blend and weave together, creating harmonies that seemed to fill not just the chamber, but the very space between the stars. As the music grew stronger, Gina added her own voice. She sang not just in Korean, but in fragments of languages from all across Earth. Celtic battle cries mixed with Native American war chants, African praise songs blended with Norse hymns to fallen warriors. The music became a tapestry of every military tradition humanity had ever known. And something began to happen to the aliens. War Commander Thex was the first to react. His throat sac, which had been still for thousands of years, began to vibrate, involuntarily. Deep rumbling sounds emerged from somewhere inside him, sounds his species had not made since before they developed advanced technology. Scholar Vale's crystalline form began to pulse with patterns of light that matched the rhythm of the human song. Her transparent body resonated like a living instrument, creating harmonies that seemed to come from the mathematical structure of the universe itself. But the most dramatic change was in Elder Corvex. The ancient ethereal's energy form began to fluctuate wildly, his usual controlled glow becoming a storm of light and color. From deep within his being came sounds that seemed to bend space and time, harmonics that spoke of battles fought between galaxies. Around the chamber, delegates from dozens of species began to make sounds they had not made in millennia. The insect. Hive speakers clicked in complex rhythms. The rock-like resonance rang like ancient bells. Even the machine constructs began to emit harmonic frequencies that spoke of programming so old it had been forgotten. The humans continued to sing, and, as they did, something awakened in every alien present. Something they had thought was lost forever, but which had only been sleeping, waiting for the right song to call it back to life. The human voices grew stronger, filling every corner of the massive chamber. Dr. Hyun Kim's flute sang like the wind across ancient battlefields, while Dr. Sora Lee's voice soared high above the others, carrying melodies that seemed to come from the stars themselves. Colonel Minho Choi's deep chanting provided a foundation that made the crystal walls vibrate, and Ambassador Gina Park wove them all together with harmonies that spoke of courage, sacrifice, and brotherhood. As the music continued, the changes in the alien delegates became more dramatic. War Commander Thex could no longer control the sounds coming from his throat. The deep rumbling had become a full war chant, words in an ancient Valorian dialect that he did not even remember learning. His massive claws began to beat against his chest in a rhythm that matched the human song, and his yellow eyes blazed with something that had been sleeping for 10,000 years. Other Valorians in the chamber began to join him. Their scaled throats vibrated with harmonies that spoke of battles fought in the cold vacuum between planets, of warrior brothers who had died protecting their homeworld from creatures of nightmare. The sounds they made were fierce and proud, but also sad, as if they were mourning something precious they had lost long ago. Scholar Vale's transformation was equally stunning. Her transparent form no longer shimmered randomly, but pulsed with complex patterns of light that matched the mathematical structure of the human music. From somewhere deep within her crystalline body came sounds like wind chimes made of starlight, melodies that turned the very concept of courage into pure music. The other Zephyrites began to resonate as well, their glass-like bodies creating harmonies that were both beautiful and alien. Their music spoke of precision and perfection, of warriors who fought not with weapons, but with the fundamental forces of the universe itself. But it was Elder Corvex and the Ethereals who underwent the most profound change. The ancient being's energy form began to pulse and swirl in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The sounds coming from him were not quite music as humans understood it, but something deeper, older, more fundamental. It was the song of matter and energy, of space and time, of warriors who had fought battles that lasted for millions of years. The other Ethereals joined in, their combined voices creating harmonics that seemed to touch the very fabric of reality. The air in the chamber began to shimmer, and some delegates swore they could see ghostly images of ancient battles, of warriors, from a dozen species fighting side by side against enemies that no longer existed. Around the chamber, every species began to remember. The insect-like hive speakers clicked and buzzed in complex rhythms that spoke of swarm battles where millions fought as one mind. The rock-like resonance rang like living bells, their songs telling of warriors who stood firm against the end of worlds. The machine constructs emitted frequencies that revealed programming so ancient it predated their current civilization, code that spoke of artificial beings who had chosen to fight alongside organic life. Even the smallest species joined, and the plant-like growlers rustled with sounds like forests preparing for war. The energy beings called flickers pulsed with light songs that told of battles fought in dimensions humans could not imagine. Every delegate in the chamber was singing, chanting, or making some kind of music that their species had not produced. For millennia, the human team continued to lead the growing symphony, but now they were no longer alone. Dr. Hyun Kim found his flute joined by Valorian war horns that materialized from somewhere in their genetic memory. Dr. Sora Lee's voice harmonized perfectly with Zephyrite crystal song and ethereal space music. Colonel Minho Choi's marching chant was supported by the clicking rhythms of the hive speakers and the ringing of the resonance. Ambassador Gina Park realized that she was no longer singing human songs. The music coming from her throat was something larger, older, more universal. It was the song that connected all warrior peoples across space and time, the melody that bound together every being willing to fight for something greater than themselves. The music built to a crescendo that seemed to shake the very foundations of the space station. Every voice in the chamber joined together in a harmony that spoke of unity, courage, and the bonds that connected all intelligent life in the face of the vast darkness between stars. And then slowly, the song began to fade. One by one, the voices fell silent until only the echo remained, bouncing off the crystal walls like a memory that refused to die. The silence that followed was profound and heavy. Every being in the chamber sat frozen, as if afraid that any movement might break the spell that had been cast. Many of the aliens were staring at their own hands, claws, or appendages in confusion, as if seeing them for the first time. War Commander Thex was the first to speak, his voice rough with emotion he had not felt in centuries. What? What have you done to us?" Elder Corvex's energy form pulsed weakly, his usual bright glow dimmed by exhaustion. "We remember," he whispered, his voice carrying harmonics of wonder, "and loss. By the ancient stars we remember what we were." Scholar Vale's crystalline form flickered between patterns of light and shadow. The mathematical beauty. We had forgotten that courage could be calculated, that honor had its own frequency. Around the chamber, delegates from dozens of species sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened to them. They had awakened something they thought was gone forever, and none of them knew what it meant. The silence in the great chamber stretched on for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. Every alien delegate sat motionless, as if they were afraid that moving might make the incredible experience they had just shared disappear like a dream. Ambassador Gina Park looked around at the transformed faces surrounding her. These were the same beings who had rejected humanity 3 months ago, who had called them primitive and incomplete. But now they looked different. Their eyes were brighter, their postures straighter. It was as if they had been asleep for thousands of years and had just woken up. Elder Corvex was the first to break the silence. The ancient ethereal's energy form pulsed with colors that had not been seen since the early days of the galaxy. "When?" he spoke. His voice carried harmonics of deep emotion that made the air itself seem to sing. "Humans," he said slowly, each word carrying the weight of millennia. "We called you primitive. We said you were incomplete, lacking in spiritual depth. But we were wrong. We were so terribly, tragically wrong." His form brightened as he continued. "You preserved what we lost. You kept alive the deepest songs of the galaxy, while we forgot how to sing them. We are the ones who became primitive. We forgot the warrior's heart that beats in all who face the infinite darkness between stars." War Commander Thex rose to his, full 7-foot height, his scarred scales gleaming in the chamber's crystal light. For the first time since anyone could remember, he placed his clawed hand over his chest in the ancient Valorian gesture of deepest respect. "Humanity," he said, his rough voice filled with something that might have been reverence. "You have shown us the path back to honor. You are not just worthy of membership in our confederation. You are worthy to lead us in remembering what we should never have forgotten." The other Valorian delegates began to stand as well, all of them making the same gesture of respect. Some of them had tears flowing down their scaled cheeks, though they had not cried in centuries. Scholar Vale's crystalline form blazed with new patterns of light as she spoke. "The mathematical beauty of what you have preserved, it surpasses any equation we have ever derived. You maintained the variables that we allowed to approach zero. You kept the formula complete while we deleted the most important parts." Around the chamber, other delegates began to speak. The insect-like hive speakers buzzed with harmonies of gratitude. The resonance rang with tones of apology and respect. Even the machine constructs emitted frequencies that translated to wonder and admiration. But it was what happened next that truly amazed the humans. Instead of simply voting on humanity's membership, the aliens began to make an unprecedented request. "We need your help," Elder Corvex said, his energy form flickering with what looked like humility. "We have forgotten who we were. Our war songs are lost. Our battle chants are silent. Our warrior traditions are gone. Will you help us remember?" War Commander Thex nodded vigorously. "My people once had songs that could inspire courage in the face of certain death. We had chants that bound warrior to warrior across impossible distances. But they are lost to us now. Will you teach us to find them again?" Scholar Vale's form pulsed with eager light. "Our ancient harmonies contained mathematical principles we no longer understand. If you could help us rediscover them, we could advance our civilization in ways we never imagined." The vote for human membership was unanimous, but it was almost forgotten in the excitement of what came next. The aliens asked humanity to establish something that had never existed before, a galactic warsong archive, a place where the martial traditions of all species could be studied, preserved, and relearned. They wanted Earth to be the center of this archive, with human scholars working alongside alien researchers to reconstruct the forgotten warrior cultures of the galaxy. It was not just membership they were offering humanity, but leadership in the most important cultural project in galactic history. 6 months later, Dr. Hyun Kim stood in his new office in Seoul, looking out at a city that had become the cultural capital of the galaxy. Alien scholars walked the streets alongside human researchers, all of them working together to piece together the fragments of ancient warrior traditions. The Galactic Warsong Archive occupied a massive complex that had been built with technology from a dozen species. In its halls, Valorian war drums beat alongside Korean percussion instruments. Zephyrite crystal harps resonated with Celtic battle horns. Ethereal energy songs mixed with Native American chants in harmonies that seemed to connect the Earth to the stars. Dr. Sora Lee had become the archive's first director of cross-species musical studies. She led expeditions to ancient battlefields, on alien worlds, searching for artifacts that might contain echoes of forgotten songs. Colonel Minho Choi established the Galactic Military Heritage Foundation, which trained beings from every species in the warrior traditions their ancestors had abandoned. But perhaps the most important change was in the exploration vessels that now ventured into unknown space. Their crews were mixed, with humans and aliens working side by side as they faced the dangers of the galactic frontier. And when they encountered threats in the dark between stars, they did not face them in silence. They sang, Korean voices blended. With Valorian roars, Zephyrite crystal song harmonized with ethereal space music, and the ancient war chants of 100 species rose together in defiance of the dark. They sang of courage and sacrifice, of bonds that connected warrior to warrior across impossible distances, of the light that drives back the darkness at the edge of known space. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy not as conquerors or subjects, but as the keepers of something precious that had almost been lost forever. They were the guardians of the warrior spirit that united all who stood ready to face the unknown, the teachers who helped an entire galaxy remember how to sing the songs that mattered most. The stars themselves seemed to listen when they sang.